Let's start. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, thanks. My name is Nick Crosetti. I work for a Whole Foods market in Kansas City, and technically I'm the cheese expert there at the store, but I also know a thing or two about chocolate, along with other things. I've been with Whole Foods for 22 years, and in that time I've definitely uh, learned a lot of practical things about chocolate and food, just by virtue of being in this great retail environment. So today we're going to be talking about chocolate from kind of a historical and agricultural perspective. We got another class coming up at the end of September, right, Magda?
Let me see.
And that one will focus more on the production from bean to bar and tasting
On the
notes.
21st. On the 21st.
21st of September. And that one will be more about chocolate than we're going to talk about today, as you'll see. This being more the history, the agricultural side of things, and where it all comes from and starts. So getting into it, we do want to get a few terms straight right out of the gate. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about cacao, which is not the same as chocolate. So cacao is the plant, is the name of the fruit and the name of the tree. Chocolate is a product made from cacao. Chocolate is very highly processed and consists of multiple ingredients. So as we're talking about things and using the word cacao and even the term cocoa, we're not talking about what we think of as chocolate in terms of a bar of candy or something that you would generally just eat on its own. Cocoa is a less processed version of chocolate, but it's still not the same as cacao. So cacao is definitely not chocolate. Cocoa is definitely not cacao, but they are more similar than chocolate and cacao are. Cocoa is really just the solids of the production of chocolate. So it's the dried beans that are separated from their fat and left with the volatile solids that is the fruit, the seeds of the fruit. So it'll all make more sense as we go through here, but right out the gate, we are talking about cacao for the most part and not chocolate necessarily. So speaking of cacao, the scientific name of the cacao tree is Theobroma cacao. This is a tree native to South America. It grows in humid, jungly places. It's kind of, it's not a very large tree considering its environment, its native environment. It grows to about 20 feet. Some can get up to 40, but it's kind of grows in the under canopy. So it prefers shade or indirect light and a very hot, humid environment that kind of limits its growth throughout the world to these jungly places. Domestication of cacao by humans was believed to originate in Ecuador or the areas between Peru and Ecuador. Being native to South America, there was some genetic studies done several years ago to kind of isolate what is the original cacao fruit, or genetically speaking, and they kind of traced it back to this area of Peru and Ecuador, where they were able to kind of isolate a genetically pure strain of cacao. Interestingly, the spread of cacao by humans goes back fairly deep into human history, but is really, again, limited to this unique environment that it needs to thrive. So the human history of interaction with cacao is kind of isolated to South America and Central America, but still a long-standing tradition. Trees, they begin to bear fruit at about 4 or 5 years old, and this picture in the upper right corner is a picture of the flowers of the tree. The tree during its fruiting cycle will burst into flowers. I mean, thousands of flowers in these kind of clumps all along the trunk and branches of these trees will kind of come forth all at once. But because it is such a tiny flower, those flowers are smaller than a fingernail. And their complex shape really makes them hard to pollinate. So there's a tiny fly called a biting midge, which is the primary and best pollinator for these plants. Bees are just too big. They can't get into where they need to go to pull the pollen out. The trees, they can't self-pollinate, so pollen from one tree needs to be implanted in another for it to produce fruit. So while these trees burst forth in flowers, very few actually result in any kind of fruit. It's 20 pods on a tree is a pretty good yield from what I've read about. And the pods themselves, they kind of resemble, I don't know, like a large yam or like a sweet potato kind of size fruit. They sprout. This picture shows kind of like right off of the tree, like the trunk of the tree. In my mind, most fruit kind of grows out on the edges of branches. Rarely do you see things growing right out of the trunk, which is apparently called cauliflory. That is the fruiting style of this particular plant. Because of that, it's fairly difficult to harvest cacao, and is primarily done by hand, just with a sharp curved knife to safely remove the fruit from the tree without damaging it. Typically, cacao is grown in small farms. Because of the difficulties of growing the fruit and making sure that it's pollinated, the growing conditions, it's harder to grow large like plantations, like you'd think of a vineyard or an apple orchard or something. The farms are typically fairly small and family run. The people who grow and harvest the produce live on the farm. So that being said, with as ubiquitous as chocolate is, there are a lot of chocolate farms all over the world. Some of the estimates I was reading was in the neighborhood of 4 million small, 5-acre farms all over the world, just producing, what I would consider modest yields for something that far. I mean, if you had a farm and only produced 600 kilograms of grapes, you wouldn't be able to make much wine. So the fruit of cacao, the tree, which is also the cacao, like I said, kind of resembles a yam or an elongated football kind of shape. They're very often like brightly colored oranges and purples and greens. they have sort of a woody gourd, like almost like a pumpkin type shell to them. And then inside is this sort of the fruit, inside of which is the beans, and they kind of grow in this unique mucilage that kind of binds them all together and is a sticky I don't know if you ever think of a coffee bean is kind of similar in the same way that there's sort of a fruit and then a pit inside with something around it that holds it all together. The interesting thing, the entire fruit is edible. The shell can be dried and ground into a flour, with a gluten-free flour. The pulp, the white part of the fruit, is edible and can be dried or eaten fresh. But the beans, the seeds inside are really what are prized and what people grow cacao for. So getting to the beans from the fruit is a labor in and of itself. It needs to be separated from the shell and then from the fruit, and then you've got what you're after. The beans are fairly large compared to coffee, a little larger than almonds even, very hard, and not in, well, edible is true, not something you would eat just right out of the fruit. The flavor of the fruit, as I heard it described, is very like floral, more than fruity, but it has a kind of an astringent character to it, almost like I've heard people talk about it like Raid, like ant spray. Like it has a bitter, astringent, chemical kind of air about it, while still being floral and perfumey. So interesting. In my mind, I can't really think of anything like that in terms of other fruit. Like maybe dragon fruit kind of has sort of this floral fruitiness to it, but the astringency and tanginess is really what sets it apart to me. From what I gather historically, it's a favorite fruit of animals in the rainforest, which is where humans come to discover it. And leaving behind the seeds is where the human relationship with cacao and later chocolate kind of developed. So people do eat the whole thing. People grow and seek it out really just for the seeds, though. I will say, I just noticed recently, within the last couple of weeks, we received this product at Whole Foods, which is dried cacao fruit. I was kind of excited to see this. So this is the fruit, the white mucilage, kind of sticky outer part of the beans, the cacao beans, that is dried and it reminds me of like fruit leather, fruit roll up kind of texture. This company makes a whole line of products using the entire fruit. They make a flour. They make you can buy just the dried fruit. They have whole cacao beans that are covered in chocolate. So interesting stuff. From their website. As this is a new product, I don't know how long we've had this. It's really, I haven't seen anything like it before. So their process is kind of new to me. How they're getting as much of the fruit as they are, I'm curious to find out. This is it's primarily a waste product in the production of chocolate. So I don't know what their relationships are with farmers or producers to be able to get the fruit that they do, but I did try it. It's good. It's very good. It has definitely a like mango, like dried mango kind of tartness to it, but it's fairly sweet, like an apricot. And then there was a distinct kind of almost like a pipe tobacco character to the dried fruit that was really unique. Very tasty. They make, you know, extensive claims about the health benefits, significant amounts of fiber, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium in a good amount in each serving. So great, good thing to add to the snack mix. Not cheap, $7 a bag, 4 servings a bag. Probably not something I'll have every day, but considering this does kind of present itself as a sustainable product, really turning what is chocolate waste products into usable, edible, nutritious food, and a handy, easy to transport, carry along with you source of antioxidants and minerals and vitamins. Sure, why not? It's great. Another product they came out with is something cacao water, which is like juice, cacao juice from the pressed pulp. Each bottle is like 33% juice. It's just water and cacao juice. The company talks about the hydration benefits and electrolytes of this product, kind of along the lines of coconut water is where I took it. Again, high in B vitamins, vitamin C, magnesium, manganese, things you may not get just in everyday life. I tried this too, just the plain cacao water. Also very good. I like this a lot too. I would put it in the range. I mean, it has a lightness to it, like coconut water, like the sweetness of it. But definitely more of a like a tart grape kind of fruitiness to it. All to say, very good, exciting things, new products, stuff that's happening with cacao that's not chocolate. No hint of chocolate in any of these things that I tried. And so yeah, always on the lookout for fun new things to try. So in terms of production, cacao is a major commodity. The west coast of Africa is far and away the #1 producer of chocolate, or of cacao, excuse me. Ivory Coast being the top producer currently. Ghana was until recently the top producer, with yeah, something like 40% of all cacao beans comes from Ivory Coast. And of the world's production, 70% of it comes from Africa. So a huge crop for them there. And that, again, all comes down to the specific climate and temperature and growing conditions that this plant needs to thrive, being ideal in that part of the world. So interesting, migrating from South America to the west coast of Africa to become this global commodity. In terms of types of chocolate, there are 3 main types used for chocolate production: Forastero, Trinitario, and Criollo. these three represent like 80 to 90% of all chocolate or all cacao that goes into making chocolate. There are other types available, other species. Think of kind of like different varieties of wine. Grapes produce different types of wine. These are the big three, with just a handful of others that pop up in the market in much more specialty avenues, single source bars, things like that. The Forastero is the most widely grown. It's also the largest pod. It produces the most beans. It's the most disease resistant. It doesn't have the best flavor though. It's typically used for bulk production. It lacks a little nuance and subtlety in its flavor. It can be, if not flat in its flavor, like bitter, more bitter than the other two. But it grows well. It's easier to grow and produces more, so it's definitely the most widely available. Criollo is about 5% overall production. Very highly regarded. It tends to have a unique kind of fruitiness to it. There are what are referred to as secondary notes. So while it has a nice rich chocolatey character to it, you get the second wave of flavors that present different kind of like almost berry notes and more of that floral character that was talked about earlier with the fruit itself. Trinitario is actually a hybrid of the two, and it is, depending on where in the world, can be more, where it's grown, it can be more disease resistant than the other two. It is also on the lower grade of things, but can be grafted onto fairly easily. So you can have in the similar way that they do with wine grapes, the tree can have grafted onto it grafts from the other two varieties or any of the others that are available to resist disease and promote growth while producing fruit of another type. So interesting genetic difference with that one in particular being, as it is a hybrid. Recently there was something identified or cultivated a little more widely called the Nacional variety. And this is coming from Ecuador and identified as the most genetically original or wild type of cacao. Excuse me. Definitely the most coveted and rare of commercially used cacao varieties. The flavors are said to be just more abundant, more vibrant, really rich and elevated, but the yields tend to be very low. They tend to, outside of Ecuador, not really grow as well as any of the others. So while it's available, it's highly coveted and fairly rare to come by. In terms of production, cacao has proven itself to be a commodity that shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. Chocolate is ubiquitous. We all can get chocolate any day, anywhere, but it's being shown with these new Blue Stripes products that we have at Whole Foods, that cacao can be used for many other things. So cocoa butter for use in cosmetics and soaps and things is surging and biting into the global supply for chocolate. Since COVID, during COVID, chocolate proved itself to be one of those things people just weren't willing to give up. And if they were going to be stuck at home, they were going to have chocolate with them. And that kind of mentality and sales growth just hasn't stopped. So the global industry for chocolate and cacao production has really grown substantially and has not slowed down. It's in the neighborhood of $46 billion now and is expected to double within the next 10 years for sure, but some are placing that more in the like 5 to 7. So people love chocolate. People aren't willing to give up chocolate, and people are discovering new ways to use chocolate.
Nick, can I please chime in with a question?
Absolutely.
Somebody just typed in if the doubling of the consumption of chocolate and cacao is related to the newly discovered health benefits of chocolate, or what contributes to that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I've seen more than anything, the health benefits of chocolate that are coming out more and more, I feel like are a result of people needing chocolate more than these discoveries of the health benefits. So cacao itself is a very healthy and like nutrient dense food. And where these unprocessed products that we talked about earlier are kind of examples of that and trying to bring that to market. Chocolate itself is not necessarily a great example of a health food or something that, because of its origins, is healthy. Chocolate has a lot of sugar in it. It's very high in calories, and the fat and sugar are what make chocolate so desirable. So while there are health benefits for sure to the closer you get to cacao from chocolate, I think the demand and the growth in the industry is really more about honestly just people's desires. They were willing to give up, even now, as you know, if we talk about inflation and things costing more, chocolate hasn't been affected by that. The sales of chocolate have not been affected by that. Chocolate definitely has gotten more expensive, but people are willing to pay for it up to a point that we haven't seen yet. So that's what I've seen. The health benefits of chocolate, I kind of feel I take with a grain of salt.
Well, actually, they are, if I may chime in, they are those dark chocolates, the 80% or 90% chocolates, and they have very little sugar, and but you are supposed to eat one square. You know, it's not like you are supposed to eat 3 tablets of chocolate a day. So chocolate is a superfood because of the antioxidants, but it has to be, as you said, low sugar.
Exactly.
And the dark type chocolates, which are not necessarily sweet, and I personally cannot eat more than one square because they don't taste very good.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, everything in moderation, including chocolate. So really, I think if it's in terms of health benefits we're looking for, the closer you get to the fruit itself, the more you're going to see the antioxidant benefit, the rare mineral and vitamin boost. I mean, there is even a stimulant quality to cacao that's not caffeine. It's different from coffee. It's a different compound. So there's that in terms of supplementing or trying to work that into a broad diet rather than just focusing on chocolate being the one superfood that's going to save us all. The thing about the global industry about chocolate is it's hugely volatile. Just as we've kind of talked a little bit about, it's kind of hard to grow cacao. It takes a lot to even get to, excuse me, goodness, the beans that we're after, and then getting to those, converting them into the chocolate that we all want takes a huge effort. There's a lot of factors that go into the global industry that is cacao and chocolate. That's very, very volatile and interconnected. So considering that Ivory Coast is currently the world's largest producer of cacao, at a certain point, 40% of their gross domestic product was this one export, which if you think about this one export as an agricultural product, it would just take one bad season to absolutely ruin a country like that. So there's huge incentive to keep the cacao production at a stable level, if not growing considerably. But that's just one part of it. Recently, there was a vanilla boom and then a vanilla bust, where in 80% of the world's vanilla comes from Madagascar. We've all seen Madagascar vanilla extract on the shelf. Most of the world's vanilla comes from Madagascar. In 2000, there was a storm that wiped out the crop that year and sent prices skyrocketing. And that sort of forced people to find new markets and on alternatives to fill in the gap. So vanilla being a crucial component in flavoring what becomes chocolate. Vanilla is tied to the production of cacao. And during this boom and the prices of vanilla shooting through the roof, all these new markets opened up and people saw it as an opportunity. And since then, they've remained, and the supply of Madagascar has recovered, and now there's an abundance of vanilla. Vanilla prices have shot way down. So that tying that into the chocolate market and just agriculture in general is really important to note, in my mind, with the end result. And the same can be said for sugar. Sugar, a major commodity worldwide. The prices of sugar are directly related to the price of oil. And the more expensive oil gets, the more people rely on sugar to produce ethanol as an alternate fuel source. And that, diminishes the global supply for things like chocolate. So all the things that go into a bar of chocolate are interdependent and really volatile in the world, both as agricultural products, but just geopolitically too. So there's also a growing interest in fair trade products, as most of these agricultural things are produced in developing countries. There's questionable trade practices there sometimes, and the fair trade movement in providing producers an equitable share, or at least a sustainable share of the commodity price, is really growing across the board, be it for cacao or vanilla or sugar or coffee or any number of products similarly tied together. So yeah, that's just another factor. And then the major hub of chocolate production is definitely in Europe. Belgium, Switzerland, France all produce most of the world's chocolate. And that kind of brings to mind the scope of the global corporation. So I know Nestle, being one of the huge, the largest publicly held food company, has very far-reaching interests. In particular, people at Whole Foods talk a lot about their sourcing of water, their bottled water lines, and how those are not necessarily the best in the best interest of the communities that they're taken from. So thinking about the chocolate that Nestle is producing and all that goes into it, and then their other business practices have far-reaching effects just in the market overall. So hugely volatile, interconnected global market that is cacao and chocolate production, I find very interesting at this point in human history. But going back in time to the origins of human interactions with cacao, the archaeological record in Mesopotamia has the Olmec people using cacao regularly as far back as 1750 BC. So Mesoamerica being this Central American region of southern Mexico and Guatemala, Honduras. The Olmec were kind of situated right in the center of it, and gave way to the Maya and the Aztec cultures, all of which associated, the use of cacao, which they consumed as a beverage. They didn't have chocolate bars. They weren't eating it as the processed product we know as chocolate. It was much more of a beverage, frequently associated with human sacrifice, and often dyed red to resemble blood with dye called achiote, which is actually the same stuff they use to make cheese orange. Just a little tidbit there from your neighborhood cheese expert. The Maya, who were in this southern Mexico, Guatemala, sort of more jungly region of the world, referred to it as cacawa. And for them, it was a warm drink that was consumed regularly, mainly because they were able to cultivate it. This was one of their cultivars, one of their products that they grew and used regularly. So it was widely available. It was consumed as sort of an aperitif, kind of at the end of a meal with religious ceremonies. It was drunk in celebration by just common folk, given to warriors. I mentioned the stimulant properties as kind of an invigorative drink. But key differences with the Maya, it was a warm drink for them. It was often combined with chili peppers to give it kind of a spiciness. The drink itself is fairly bitter, if not cornmeal and other additives. The Aztec, on the other hand, had to import the beans. Their territory was more desert climate, so they couldn't grow the beans themselves. And as such, it was used as a currency for them. Some of the exchange rates I was able to find, one ripe avocado would cost you 3 cacao beans, a turkey, 100 cacao beans. So for them, it was an upper class and religious ceremony use. and demanded as tribute, used as money. The word chocolate comes from the Aztec word xochitl, which translated to chocotil, and literally just meant cocoa water. It was just this drink that the Spanish explorers encountered when they came upon the Aztecs, and coined this term, brought it back to Europe in and around the 1600s. The main thing to remember, and I would encourage everybody to look up this website, Instructables. They have a recipe and kind of a walkthrough of what the Mayan chocolate drink is like. The frothiness is really what was celebrated in this drink. It had kind of a foamy quality to it. This little illustration kind of talks about shows how they poured it back and forth over a great distance to promote this like frothy head to what was a bitter, spicy, hot or cool, as the Aztec liked it, drink. But definitely, again, this is not chocolate. This is not like hot chocolate as we know it. It was a bitter, almost savory beverage, more like coffee, I would think. The Europeans were the ones that really added sugar to it and kind of sweetened it up. And debates abound whether or not Christopher Columbus encountered chocolate or cacao. It's likely, but it didn't catch his attention as much as it did Cortez, who brought it back to Spain and talked about it as money growing on trees. I mean, they saw the way that the Aztec people used it as a currency, and understanding this is something you could grow, saw the huge economic impact that it could be on Spanish colonies. An interesting quote I found from one Spanish missionary in the 16th century described a concoction which they made called chocolate, which is, to those who are not accustomed, disgusting, with a foam on top, bubbling like that of feces, which is certainly a lot to put up with. And I would imagine to Europeans in the New World, trying to drink this strange beverage would not be something that they were used to or particularly like right out the gate. But they did bring it back to Europe. By 1700, it was popular all throughout the continent. And from there we went. Some of the oldest chocolate manufacturers, now we can start talking about chocolate different from cacao. The Baker Chocolate Company, which is still in operation, was founded in Boston in 1765. Before there was, I mean, this is like a colony. They were making chocolate and still are to this day. The introduction of milk chocolate happened in the 1860s in Switzerland when Henry Nestle sold his baby food. It was powdered milk he had for baby food to his neighbor who was working on chocolate, perfecting chocolate and its production, and thus chocolate milk was born. Cadbury in England goes back to 1868. They made the first Easter egg in 1875. And Milton S. Hershey bought his equipment for chocolate making and chocolate coating at the 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago. All of these companies still producing chocolate to this day, which is an amazing feat. One thing that struck me in putting this together and just thinking about chocolate is how Switzerland became, or Belgium for that matter, so synonymous with high quality chocolate. If you can't grow cacao in Switzerland, they didn't have colonies that imported it. Just how did Switzerland become this hub for the production and the high quality reputation of chocolate. One of the main reasons is this technique called conching, which is a process of grinding the cacao beans, and it was pioneered in Switzerland. And the Swiss conch for a long time. The longer you grind the beans, the finer the paste becomes, and more crystalline the texture results in a kind of melt in your mouth, non-gritty kind of mouthfeel texture. Some of these producers will grind and grind and grind for days on end before moving to the next step in chocolate production. It also produces almost a caramely kind of flavor profile to the end chocolate. So there's just that extra satisfaction in the flavor of Swiss chocolate, different from other producers. These gentlemen all here, many of whose name you will recognize just from chocolate still being produced today, all kind of operated in and around Switzerland around the same time too. So there is kind of these titans, these rogues gallery of Swiss chocolate entrepreneurs, all working around each other and with each other to produce what is, today some of the finest chocolates still in production, whether they be with hazelnuts from the Kohler company in the 1860s, or Toblerone has been around since the early 1900s. It's just the right place at the right time, that Europe had discovered the cacao bean, and that Switzerland grabbed hold of it in making chocolate what it is today. They also eat a lot of chocolate in Switzerland, so people in Switzerland demand high quality chocolate. It's 12 kilos per capita. is a lot of chocolate for any one person to eat, but we thank them for it. So that is cacao and the beginnings of chocolate production, where it comes from, some of the health benefits, and hopefully a teaser about what's to come when we learn about how we actually get to the chocolate bar, and tasting some of the different components, and really talking about some of the fantastic local chocolate producers we have here in Kansas City. Magda, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't click on it. September 21, it will be chocolate part 2.
Chocolate part 2, yeah.
Thank you.